Call to order the May 18, 2021 meeting of the West Palm Beach Planning Board. Madam Clerk, if you would kindly call the roll.
Stephen Mans,
Present.
Peter Pivko,
Present.
Deborah Rain,
Present.
Andres Paradello,
Present.
John Higginbotham.
Here.
All right, Ms. White, would you please read out loud the COVID-19 protocols we are following?
For the last time.
For the last time, perhaps.
Pursuant to Mayor Keith A. James's Executive Order number 2020-05, issued on April 2nd, 2020, the City of West Palm Beach's boards and committees are conducting meetings through media technology and have released the requirements to have a quorum of its members physically present at City Hall. On April 14, 2020, Mayor Keith A. James issued Executive Order number 2020-09, which specifically provides rules of procedure for conducting city meetings, including requirements for quasi-judicial hearings. To ensure the ability for the public to continue to participate in this public hearing, it is being streamed live and available for viewing in the City Commission chambers located at City Center, 401 Clematis Street, on the condition that social distancing be practiced. Additionally, for those wishing to access the meeting remotely, they are able to do so directly through the applicable Zoom webinar link, as well as the city's usual media channels, including WPB-TV 18, the city's website, and the city's YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter feeds. Anyone from the public who would like to provide comment on an agenda item is able to do so through the following. Number 1, in the City Center Flagler Gallery. Number 2, dialing 561-320-641-6451 and leaving a voicemail not to exceed 3 minutes. Number 3, sending an email or video recording to pbpubliccomment@wpb.org, or 4, completing the online public comment form at www.wpb.org/public comments. Those accessing the meeting directly through Zoom may also use the Q&A or raise hand features. Regardless of method, please be sure to indicate the agenda number or case number for which you are providing comment. Everyone providing testimony must have video capability and will need to be sworn in. The swearing in will occur at the start of each case on the agenda. If you're about to provide testimony and were not sworn in, please be sure to indicate such and be sworn in before offering your testimony. After the applicant presents their case, staff will provide a presentation, and then the public will have an opportunity to speak or have their comments read into the record from previously received correspondence. The board will then go into executive session. Prior to rendering a decision, the board will confirm no additional public comments have been received by staff. And finally, for the members of the board, it is emphasized that Florida sunshine laws are applicable, and you may not use the chat feature or any other form of individual communication to discuss matters with other board members, the applicant, or the general public during the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. White. The next order of business is approval of the April 20, 2021 minutes. Has everyone had the chance to review them? Are there any comments, corrections, or proposed changes? And if not, may I have a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next on our agenda is report of the planning staff.
Chair, could you come back to me? I got my grandbaby. My husband's not home yet, so.
Okay, not a problem. Next on the agenda then, remarks by the chairperson, and I have the unhappy task of announcing the resignation of Mark Pateman from our board. This is the third member of the planning board we have recently lost, and all for the same reason. They all have moved outside of the city limits. We either need to see if this residency requirement can be revisited, We need to ask our local realtors to step up and showcase more West Palm Beach properties. Anyway, I want to thank Mark for his service on this board. His contributions will be missed, and we wish him happiness in his new home in Hypoluxo. Next on the agenda is the declaration of ex parte communications, and let me begin by disclosing that I met with the applicant on planning board case number 95AAA, and the code revision case number 2103. Nothing we discuss will prevent me from deciding these cases solely based upon the evidence presented this evening. Does anyone else have anything to disclose?
Yes. I also met with the applicant on case number 950 AAAA and 2103, but my decisions will be based on the evidence presented tonight.
I also met with the applicant on case 950 AAAA. However, my decisions will be based on the evidence presented.
Andre or John, anything to discuss?
Yes, I had ex parte communications with the applicant, and my decision will be solely based on the information presented to us this evening.
Thank you. John?
I was contacted by the applicant for the same two cases that we're discussing. I declined ex parte communication, and so there was no meeting.
It's that caller ID. It worked for you, right, John? All right. All right. So next on our agenda are continued cases, of which there are none. That will then bring us to planning board case number 950 AAA. And I would ask for those, we want to do the swearing in of speakers. Would everyone who plans to speak or offer testimony this evening, please raise your right hand. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be truthful.
I do.
Right, thank you. We'll hear from the applicant and Mr. Oyer.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and planning board members. Trying to adjust my camera so you have my entire head in it, so I apologize. Harvey Oyer on behalf of the applicant. I have with me on the phone our land planner, Roger Ramdeen, and a principal of the related companies, Jordan Rathliff, who can speak in greater detail should you have questions. Roger, do you have the ability to pull up the PowerPoint presentation? So we are before you this evening requesting a major amendment to the Rosemary Square core development regulations. Roger, there we go, perfect. This is within your jurisdiction because this half a block is the northernmost reach of the City Place DRI. So this is not within the downtown master plan area, it's within your jurisdiction because it's in the DRI. Next slide, please. And we are making a three-part request. We are requesting to allow increased height from 15 stories to 25 stories in this sub area, which is known as Rosemary Square North sub area. But the increase in height does not pertain to all of the sub area, only to the eastern 250 feet. I'll explain more in a moment. We are also seeking to modify the affordable workforce housing provision for the same Rosemary Square North sub area. And number three, a minor architectural change to not only the Rosemary Square North sub area, but also the center sub area to allow a 42-inch safety rail on rooftop terraces and gardens. So that means this would apply to the old Macy's site as well, which you know is going to be redeveloped into a 21-story luxury residential project on top of a fairly significant retail project, which was approved by your board and the City Commission a year or so ago, and that is ready to break ground. Next slide, please. So I think the biggest issue and the first issue is the increase in height. And to give a little history lesson to those who might not have been on the board a couple of years ago, we actually came to you and the city commission seeking additional height on this block. We were given additional height to 15 stories. We're now seeking the ability to go higher, which the staff is supportive of, provided that we meet several limitations on it. So the request is to modify the existing 5/15 story to allow an additional 10 stories, but it's only on the eastern 250 feet, or actually 250 feet from the center line of Rosemary Avenue. And I'll give you an illustration in a moment that will show you why the height is pushed to that corner of Fern and Rosemary. In order to take advantage of this additional 10 stories of height, any level 3 site plan, which of course comes back to you for approval, tonight is simply a zoning request, would have to include a minimum 40,000 square foot full grocer as part of the redevelopment plan, as part of that level 3 site plan approval. And I can probably pause here and tell you the problem that we're trying to solve for. And what we're trying to solve for is a larger grocer in the downtown. We have a just over 20,000 square foot Publix that has been there for over 20 years. It is either the busiest or one of the busiest Publixes per square foot in the state of Florida. If you've ever tried to find a parking space there, you'll know what I'm referring to. When it was built, we had about 1,000 people living in the downtown. Today, we have, 8,000 or so living in the downtown. So you're talking on the order of an 8-fold increase in the users of it since it was built. Anyone who uses it, I'm one of the users, can attest to the fact that we need a larger grocer, and preferably a full service grocer with pharmacy and all of the things that you would expect in a full size grocery store. Challenges are many. One is fitting it on the geometry of that property. Number 2 is parking it. If you've ever dealt with Publix, they have a very high parking requirement, which we have to meet, but we have to meet it in a very expensive structured parking facility. And there is about a 16-foot elevation change between Rosemary and Sapodilla. And then to make it even more challenging for the design professionals, the south half of the property is in the City Place DRI, meaning it is subject to your jurisdiction and regulations. There's an intervening alley owned by the city, and the north half of the property that faces Avernia Street is not in your jurisdiction. It's in the downtown master plan, which has a completely different zoning scheme, completely different regulatory structure. So imagine trying to build a project in 2 different zoning districts with a 16-foot elevation change and parking, 5 spaces per 1,000 to make this work, all to make no money, because as you know, Publix doesn't pay money to landlords, they're the attractant. So this is what we're trying to solve for. I think universally we agree that this would be a great addition to the downtown. So how do we do that? Well, we need to get more height and density to make up for the loss of that parking structure that will be multiple decks of parking that is not leasable or sellable space, and the additional setbacks that we're about to discuss. So your number 3 bullet point is we agree to a condition or a restriction that additional upper stories above 10 stories need an additional setback along Fern and a smaller one along Sapodilla. What interest are we trying to protect? We're trying to protect the 3-story townhouses facing the site on the south side of Fern Street by requiring multiple layers of setback to get the height further away from them. Height is not a problem in the southeast corner because at that intersection is where you have the 360 Rosemary Tower that is an 18-story building that has the functional height of a taller building because of the very large floor-to-ceiling heights. At the corner, the southeast corner, that's also zoned for 25 stories and will likely be 25 stories in the relatively near future, half a block to the south, you have a 21-story project at the old Macy's site that is about to commence construction. And as you'll hear later in the agenda, you have another 25-story building a block away. So that's a long way of saying there's going to be a lot of height in that area, particularly on that intersection. So additional height on this site will not be out of context or character at all. The interest we're trying to protect is the townhouse owners further west up the hill. The height request is consistent with the prior request from 2 years ago. It is to facilitate development of this block, which has been a challenge for all of the reasons I've stated. Publics won't go. They have a long-term lease. The only way to change that is to build them a bigger Publix, which comes with the challenges I've described. So we all acknowledge that it's an incredibly complex, challenging, and expensive project to design, build, and try to find a way to make it be financeable. And it requires some additional TDM strategies, which we are agreeable to as well. Next slide, please, Roger. This is the zoning map for the area. I don't have the pointer. Roger, I think you may. You can circle the subject site in the red box and the height around it. To the east, you see the QBD 8-25 directly to the east. That is the 360 Rosemary office tower, which will open next month. I'm happy to report it's fully leased. And better than that, 75% of the tenants are from out of market. So they are brand new, high value businesses being moved to our community. You can see that that light purple QBD 8-25 extends to the south. That southeast corner will also become a tall building. And you can see half a block to the south, the 21-story former Macy's site commences construction. So this is a very dense vertical part of the downtown. All good. This allows us to realize our long hoped for mobility goals, utilizing Brightline, hopefully, making Brightline achieve greater ridership and success, and keeping the density on the west side of the FEC tracks, which is good for all of the downtown. That way people don't have to cross that additional choke point to get east and then come across it again in the afternoon. So this is simply to illustrate that it's proposing height where there already is height and where there will be more height. Next slide, please. Now, this is a massing with Fern Street at the bottom of your screen, Rosemary to the right. And you'll see the several layers of setback that are required. And you'll see that the greatest height is only allowable within 250 feet of the center line of Rosemary. And that is because the townhouses at 3 stories, which are our neighbors to the south, are in that area opposite the hall where we are not going to build the additional height. So I think this massing best illustrates what we're trying to protect. And we've done that in several ways. One is pushing the newly requested height solely to the east, and the other is to add an additional layer of building setback above 10 stories. Next slide, please. This illustrates those additional setbacks. As measured from the center line of Fern Street, it is 46 feet minimum setback to the podium, 55 feet to the podium that's above 44 feet, 76 feet from the center line up to 10 stories. And if you go above 10 stories, it's a 96-foot setback, and then nothing above 15 stories. Additionally, on the other side of the center line of Fern Street is another 47 feet before you hit the front door of the nearest townhouse. So that's a total of 143-foot setback between the townhouses and the beginning of the 11th story of that building, should a building that tall be constructed. Next slide, please. These are some massing renderings that I think make this easier to understand. In the foreground on the right is the 360 Rosemary office tower that is complete. On your left is the 21-story building that will replace the Macy's. And in the center, in the different shades of olive green, is our site. So this would be looking from the southeast to the northwest. And at the bottom of your screen is looking down Fern Street from west to east, which allows you to see that wedding cake setback effect. Next slide, please. As part of the request, we're modifying the workforce housing provision for this north sub-area, providing a more robust, affordable workforce housing requirement. It removes the buyout option for residential units other than the ACLF units. So under the existing code, we have an ability to buy out the obligation. This would remove our ability to buy it out, meaning it would have to be constructed unless it's part of the ACLF. It also increases the number of required buyout of affordable workforce units from 25 units to 40 units if we propose a 100% ACLF project. And it allows for off-site construction of affordable and workforce housing units within the downtown master plan for those that can be constructed off-site. Next slide, please. And then finally, there's a minor architectural change to both the north sub-area and the center sub-area that it resolved the conflict between the building code and the Rosemary Square regulation. Building code requires a 42-inch safety railing for rooftop terraces and gardens. The railing is considered an architectural element and therefore counts towards the building height. So we're proposing to amend the regulations to allow the 42-inch safety railing and not have it count towards the building height. However, that railing must be transparent and serve the purpose of enclosing a terrace or rooftop garden on the top of the podium. Transparency is required to prevent the illusion, of course, of additional building height. Next slide, please. These requests all comply with section 94-32A, which are the standards for major amendments. I'm happy to go through these in detail should you wish, but staff agrees with us, so I don't think there's any issue there. Next slide, please. And we have letters of support from many of our neighbors, including Dreyfus School of the Arts, the Dreyfus School of the Arts Foundation. Next slide, please. Brightline, big time restaurant group, which owns a number of restaurants in the neighborhood. And we have others, Mr. Chair, that were submitted into the city that I asked you make part of the record. Next slide, please. So our request is a recommendation of approval to the City Commission that the request complies with all the applicable standards contained in section 94-32A. And we have staff recommendation for approval. I stand ready for any questions, Mr. Chair, should you have any now, or you may want to wait until after staff makes their presentation, but we are available to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you. Any questions of the applicant? Then I will ask one, and it was something we discussed in our private session, but I wanted the discussion part of the public record as well. Let me say, as a threshold matter, I think we all had agreed that it was very useful for whatever the tall buildings at West Palm Beach be, that was an ideal location. That we had decided as part of our planning that we wanted Rosemary Square and Clematis Street, the area between it, to be the place where we would have our tallest buildings. And when you came before us a few years ago with Mr. Green's project, several of us asked, why couldn't that tall buildings be put there where we had wanted the tall buildings to be? And you explained, I think very persuasively, that it's the infrastructure there, the roadways, other things just could not bear that taller building, and that's why it had to be relocated elsewhere. And I'm trying to reconcile those words you told us back then with the current situation we are here today. If those were unworkable for Mr. Green's taller buildings, why does it make sense here now?
So I don't recall saying that it wasn't workable here. I do recall saying that it was more workable there because, of course, that's a 3.5 acre site, many multiples the size of this site. It's surrounded on all 4 sides by a roadway network, including quadrille, which is a 5-lane or a 4-lane divided. So much more road capacity. That is, of course, an 830,000 square foot building as originally proposed. A lot of that was office, which has a lot of AM and PM peak traffic. So that was a better situated site size-wise, road capacity-wise. But I think most of all, there was a strong public policy initiative to get some development going in the north end of the downtown. There was none at that time. So we had cranes in the sky in the central and southern DMP, but the north part of the downtown was still a bit of a desert other than Lofton Place. And so there was, I think, a strong desire to kickstart economic development in that area. Those are the reasons I recall, Mr. Chair. Obviously, this has always been anticipated, the subject area that we're talking about tonight, for additional height, or they would not have created the DMP 14 years ago with all of these tall zoning districts. If the corollary question is, well, why didn't it occur here earlier? I think there's a bunch of reasons for that. Number one, these were, there were no big assemblages put together. We had a bunch of small historic lots from the original subdivision of West Palm Beach over 100 years ago. So there were not big canvases to work on. It was long before any of us had ever heard of the concept of Brightline, which of course has become a game changer. And the Brightline faces the west side of the tracks, not the east side of the tracks. And then the final issue is what we find ourselves in the middle of today, which is this, what I think the history books will reflect as one of the greatest wealth migrations in American history, coming to Florida in the post-COVID environment. And West Palm Beach, frankly, is in the enviable position of being the recipient of more than our share of that. You can barely pick up the newspaper without reading the story of another major American corporation that is considering moving to Palm Beach County. And I give a lot of credit to my client that's on the phone. They are the ones that have created the environment at Rosemary Square with their $500 million reinvestment into Rosemary Square, with their vision for the old Macy's site, with 360 Rosemary that is bringing, some of the nation's top financial firms here. They've created the market for this area to finally redevelop 14 years after Ziskovich outlined it to have this sort of height and intensity, but there was no market demand for it, and there were no assemblages that could accommodate it. So a lot has changed even within the last 6 months that finally allows this to go forward. And I think for those of us that are urbanists, we've long looked forward to enough demand to put this kind of density where it belongs in an urban core and not spread out in suburbia. Much more efficient use of land and transportation infrastructure and all of our infrastructure. So we're quite excited by it and hope you are too.
All right, thank you so much. Any other questions of the applicant? And let me just say before John answers, Mr. Oyer, we had that discussion, our private thing, and you had satisfied me then. I just wanted to make sure it's part of this record as well. John, did you have a question?
Yes, if we could go back to the massing study.
Is this the one you want to see?
Yeah, that one's fine, or you can go to the one, that's fine, we can stop at this one. I found this one in the preceding slide very helpful because that was something that I was really looking for, was a massing study to better understand it. That's great to leave that up there. So from what I'm kind of gathering here is that it's the intent ultimately of the developer to develop the entire block and to vacate the alley. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay, and so no additional heights being requested on the piece of property north of the alley, just for this section, the 250 feet to the center line of Rosemary. That's really what we're talking about in terms of existing additional height.
At this point, there has not been an application to change the north half.
And again, I'm just asking questions to fully understand what's being requested. So what's being requested is the additional height here is shown by this axonometric massing study, and then the two additional amendments, those would apply to this site as well as the Macy's site. Is that correct?
Well, request number 3 would apply to the Macy's site because that is the center sub area of the Rosemary Square area. The second request modifying the affordable and workforce housing only applies to this north sub area. The Macy's site, the center sub area, has its own separate codified workforce and affordable regulations.
Okay. And so when you say this particular sub area, we're talking about this half block north of Firm Street.
That is correct.
Okay, so that's where we're looking at the workforce housing. And then on the railing issue, that would apply to both this site as well as the existing approved Macy's project.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Wait, any other questions of the applicant? And if not, let us hear then from the city's principal planner, Eric Schneider.
Okay, for the record, Eric Schneider, Principal Planner. Roger, would you mind putting that graphic back up that you just had, please? I have a PowerPoint presentation, but it kind of walks through most of what the applicant showed. I do want to touch on this graphic a little bit. From the original approval, and that is also carried through with this approval, this drawing is a little misleading on how big a building could be built. This is the exterior framework of where a building could be built, but we embedded in the original and what current regulations for this site, the up to 15 stories, and it will continue forward with this, that no portion of the tower could be longer than 250 feet. So where you're seeing that first break that goes up and then the second part that leads up into the extended tower, it cannot go that length of the entire block, which you might, if you think about the Brightline building, which goes from it's about a 350-foot long building from east to west, and it creates the big wall. We embedded in these regulations based on what we realized from the Macy's block that was too long. So we put in that no portion of the tower can be longer than 250 feet. So in this instance, where you see the tower that goes up, there would be a big gap. There would have to be a gap between that extended part that goes up to from 15 to 25 stories and then the tower on the other side. If I don't have the cursor over that I can do, but it would go between those. So you'd have two towers popping up over that base. So it's not, you wouldn't have that entire, so if that arrow goes straight down 2 levels, then down there's got to be a cut. And if it goes down even further to the next, that's part of the tower, and goes down, that's part of the tower. In there has to be a cut that can't be longer than 250 feet on either one. So there will be a gap between those 2 towers. I just wanted to point that out, that's already embedded in the regulations. You wouldn't see a building that looks like this, or on the next slide where it looked like the building went the entire length of the block. That is not possible. So I just wanted to clarify that. A couple of things you guys had asked about, John had asked about the specifics, and as Harvey said, the railing, there's the Macy's block, the city center only has the railing portion added to it. This one, the very base level of what we call the tower is that first step back. It can go a little bit longer than it can go. They can have one floor that goes longer than 250 feet. So you'd actually be looking at 6 stories at about 250 feet, but it would have to be set, that gap fill in has to be set back further off the facade to give it the illusion of 2 towers still. And then you can have there's a little railing on top or a clear wall that can go on top of that for outdoor terrace. So just want to point that out. But the general gist of it is this is getting added here. There are also some cleanup things, clarifying the electric vehicle chargers, the bike share program, some of the other TDM things that were embedded in the original regulations that since we wrote those 2 years ago, we realized needed to be tweaked a little bit. And those are in here. As stated, staff is only supporting this project to 25 stories based on the provision of at least 40,000 square foot full service grocer. And we've added a definition of full service grocer in the regulations. Otherwise, the regulations do meet the standards, the rezoning standards for a major plan development amendment, which this is. And as stated by Mr. Hoyer, there is a level 3 site plan required when they do come in for the development of this block, which will go through the full public hearing process. This is just setting up the framework of what that is. So this will not allow them to go to 25 stories without a full service grocer on this block. The other question had been what happens on the other side of the block. You don't see it fall off the back of this building. The alley and the north half of this block are part of the downtown master plan regulations. They allow an 8-story building, and with TDRs can get you to 10 stories. So this will be the higher part of this block. Thank you. So the north half of the block will be, because of the downtown master plan zoning, a lower scale, and you can see it there, the QBD 8 to 10 right above the red square. So I just wanted to point that out as well, so that you guys could get a reference. I know it's a little difficult without having an actual building that you're reviewing as part of this, but you do get to see that building and when it does come in. Some of the things, Steve, you mentioned about the, how does the added impact around the area with the roadway network. There are some TDM measures if the traffic impact is greater than what the existing Publix has. That will be looked at. And obviously, if they build a bigger grocery store than the existing one and add some residential, yes, there'll be an impact. So they'll have to do some transportation demand mitigation strategies. But all of that will be looked at as part of the site plan. The downtown is a transportation concurrency exception area, so it allows additional, has a cap on the amount of square footage. And then the city place DRI, which this is part of, has an upper limit on the amount of the upper limit on the number of commercial square footage that can be on there, and they do not exceed that. So staff is recommending approval of this as presented. Do you have any questions of staff?
Any questions of staff? John?
Yes, if we could go back to the axonometric, the massing study again, just for point of clarification. Yeah, and that's fine. So Eric, just to be clear, the tower, there's a maximum width of a tower of 250 feet. Is that correct?
Yes, the length as they're showing from on the eastern half. It's to group it on the eastern half. You can kind of see, and the reason for that is, you see actually the little driveway on the bottom there. That's the about where the driveway is that you would drive into, go to the parking lot for Publix, and the alley is on the side where it says Fern Street, and there's that little curb cut there. The townhouses start right about where the period in street is, and again run to the west. So what staff has looked at through this whole process is that as little as possible the impact of a taller building here by the additional setbacks would be or to have on those townhouses. And then you can even see it in the podium notch there, that where it drops down on that first level, or that on the podium, it's not where the first level is. There's a difference in height, that they're only allowed to go 44 feet to the left of that arrow. They're allowed to go 60 feet to the right of it, subject to the additional 42 inches of railing for outdoor gardens. So staff has looked at how to balance the variety of interests here, the residential townhouses, which are a lower scale, and the higher building on this site. Did that answer your question?
It does, and I understand that this is just a building envelope. This isn't actually the building, but this is just an envelope. Can you just for my benefit, can you explain to me, when you talk about tower, what is the definition of a tower? Is it the portion of a building above a certain height?
In this instance, yes. We have in the regulations, and they start on page 25 of your report, there's a table. And so there's a definition of what the podium is. And it, so the height, it goes up to, or where the tower starts, the tower is across from the residential 44 feet, and then over 60 feet, and the rest of it below that would be considered the podium.
Okay, so above 60 feet is the tower, where the tower, the limitation on the width of the tower starts. Is it 60 feet and above?
Well, if you look at this drawing and you see starting at Rosemary, and then you come and it has that's the 60-foot height before it does that step down on the podium. That's then, so the tower in that area starts where it's above 60 feet. Where the step down, the tower actually starts at 44 feet, give or take, based on this, as was mentioned, the slope of the grade. So it may be lower as you get close. It's going to be lower as you get closer to Sapodilla, where the tower actually starts, as opposed to the Rosemary, where it's higher. That's why it's to try to keep that scale lower against the residential.
All right, thank you very much.
Any other questions of Eric? And if not, John, have we any people who wish to comment from the public?
Mr. Chair, we do have a number of emails. I don't know if Hope is going to read those into the record. We also have 6 voicemails, and there are, I believe, 5 people in the chambers that wish to speak. So if we can start with the emails, if those are going to be read.
All right, Ms. White, if you'll do the honors.
Okay. The first is from Lola Scoby, who says, I speak in favor of revising some features of this building, including how those changes relate to Related's long-term plan, but she opposes the project. Next, we have Tom Lindley, who initially opposed the project and then came back with, my name is Tom Lindley. Together with my wife, I am the owner and year-round resident of our home at 640 Fern Street. I am an attorney who, on behalf of businesses and governmental units, has led or defended development permits. I support urban density and its associated benefits, but I also seek to mitigate its more negative aspects. I do not want to oppose this project. Instead, I'm asking you, the planning board, to add 2 conditions to Related's already conditioned proposal. As the staff report confirms on page 4, the proposed tower should not be taller than the already approved 15 stories. Staff supports the taller project only if your approval includes some conditions, page 4 and 8. These conditions both legally and properly precede the future level 3 site plan, because the conditions address how Related must prepare that future site plan. I'm asking you to add 2 separate but similar conditions that will mitigate negative aspects that will arise if they are not addressed in advance. These 2 conditions are general, and they allow Related great flexibility when it develops its site plan. The first condition is to require that any truck entrance not be located on Fern Street. As you know, in the Rosemary Square area, Fern Street is already a traffic mess, and the end of the alley by our townhomes is the worst of that mess. The new residential tower at the former Macy's site will make that congestion even worse. Recognizing that mess, Related has built its loading dock for the 360 building on Avernia Street, and Related has already purchased some properties on Avernia across from this project. There might also be options for an entrance on Sapodilla. Related is free to propose a design with its truck entrance on either Avernia or Sapodilla, but requiring that Related not put the truck entrance on Fern will slow the already too heavy truck traffic on Fern Street. The second condition is that Related should be required to study whether as it plans for that full block, the tower should be shifted to a bit north. That is, Related should be required to consider shifting the tower a quarter block north to move a center portion of the site above the soon to be vacated alley. That small shift would significantly reduce the wind tunnel and heat and pollution effects at street level, thereby helping to preserve both our houses, values, and the urban ambience that we all desire. Thank you for this opportunity to submit a written comment. I will be at the public hearing on May 18th and open to answering any questions you might have. Tom Lindley. The next is from Constance Chan. Not all businesses are moving to West Palm Beach. As more office workers can telework, families are in fact moving out of many congested city centers around the country. It is more desirable to keep Rosemary Square a pedestrian and family friendly place with low rise buildings, letting in air and sunlight. Amenities in the square, restaurants, theaters also provide jobs for residents. As another neighbor has pointed out, there's negative environment impact, wind tunnel from tall buildings, especially if they are too close together, as in the case of 375 and 360 South Rosemary. The loading dock entrance for Publix, as currently proposed, will cause serious traffic congestion on Fern Street, especially as there are no provision to accommodate parking for future residents in the Macy's site. As most trucks will be coming in from 95 and Tamarind, it makes more sense to move the entrance to Sapodilla between Avernia and Fern. That is from Constance Chan, and she is in opposition. Next, I have Claudia Sands, who sent two letters of opposition, but the second had comment. My name is Claudia Sands. I am a resident of City Place Townhomes. I additionally serve as the secretary of our POA. The POA board is not representing the townhomes, and my comments are those of an individual homeowner. I urge the planning board to review this project in its totality and to maintain the existing zoning until the complete project within the disparate zoning areas and approval authorities can be addressed in unison. In prior conversations with staff, it was mentioned that in hindsight, different actions may have taken with the redevelopment of the Macy's site. We have learned that the approval and rezoning process is inherently flawed. Under the current system and code, rezoning is permitted without a full site plan review of the final project. I hope the planning board and staff will incorporate these historical lessons by giving equal weight to the concerns of the residential community so that any negative impact may be mitigated in advance. At this juncture, I am opposed to increasing the tower height from 15 to 25 stories, as well as some of the suggested architectural changes without understanding the full scope of the project. In 2019, the townhomes publicly supported the 15-story height limitation from 5 stories. The proposal at that time included plans of increasing the size of the Publix supermarket or grocery by roughly the same 34%. I urged the planning board to honor its original commitment to the community of the 15-story height limitation. Staff also mentioned that traffic concurrency is not required at this time. This project should not be viewed from a sub-area silo. Site plan studies regarding traffic, safety, wind, sunlight, sinkhole, and noise pollution should be concurrent. Allowing a 300-foot building of incongruous architecture at the city's highest elevation will dwarf our townhomes, block our sunlight and views, invade our privacy, and cause harm to our landscaping and plants. The loading dock entrance, even with the best effort to conceal the entryway, will face the front doorways of the Fern Street residences. It is very hard to conceal an 18-wheeler pulling in to make a delivery. This is undesirable from both an aesthetic and safety standpoint. This proposed entryway will create a pedestrian and emergency services hazard. The entrance to the loading docks is not currently located on Fern and should not be placed at this location. All of these factors will reduce our property values and quality of life. Additionally, Related was unable to confirm if the setbacks will start from the existing curb outside of Publix or if the location of the curb will be modified. It is also important that the upper stories of the tower not exceed the setback from a vertical plane. Preferably, the upper stories should be further set back from the podium instead of extending and arcing over the podium to maximize sunlight to the residences and to prevent a violation of the setback. It is my hope as a community that we can work together and energize the city in a positive way while maintaining its original charm. However, a zoning request of this magnitude should only be considered from the lens of the entire site plan, with all approval authorities working together to ensure the best possible outcome for all parties. Thank you for your time and consideration. The next comes from Helena Koshnevis. She is in opposition. She says, hello, opposing to related group requests for 25 to 26-story building Publix. 1, building height causes environment impact, wind tunnel, noise, and more. 2, having loading dock across from townhomes. The next comes from Sam Olavi, who submitted 2 forms opposing the project. He says there is no need for the increase of building height. There are potential problems of taller buildings in and around Rosemary Square. People enjoy coming to downtown West Palm Beach precisely because they can enjoy open space with leisure activities and can see other people doing the same in sunlight and clouds, not to be sounded by high rises. We want to feel the breeze. Thank you. Additionally, he states, I sent another form but forgot to add the case number. I'm opposing to related group. We go to downtown to enjoy nature, clean air, and breeze, not to look at high rises. Please don't take away Florida charm. Thank you. The next come from Akram Koshnevis. They are opposing the project. They're opposing to 25 or higher story structure on the current Publix location. We enjoy living in West Palm Beach in Florida to enjoy nature, the smell of the ocean, breeze, layout, and more. We don't want to live like New York or Miami with flooding problems every time it rains. The next comes from, this is the 4 letters that were also mentioned in Mr. Oyer's presentation. And I have 2 letters of support from 2 Boynton Beach residences, 2 letters of support from Sabrina Davis and Lloyd Davis. I will not read their comments into the record. This letter of support comes from Casper Seldiga, and he says the public members of the planning board. I have lived in downtown West Palm Beach for almost 2 years now. I support the vision and goals the city has outlined for the downtown. I'm writing you today to share my support for the rezoning of the public site from 15 stories to 25 stories. Due to work, I was not able to attend the meeting in person, but I wanted to ensure my comments were heard. I live only a few blocks away from Rosemary Square. While Rosemary Square is a success now, I like to imagine what it could be if we had more professionals working downtown and more residents calling the neighborhood home. More people living in Rosemary Square, spending time there, and enjoying our West Palm Beach lifestyle will only benefit our downtown. The downtown sorely needs a full size grocery store as well. If we need increased density to get the full size grocery store, let's make it happen. It's a win for the entire city. Thank you for your support. This comes from Kevin Burr. He is in support of the project. Hi, members of the board. I support the project of the rezoning of the public site from the 15 to 25 stories. Attracting more people and more density to the downtown West Palm Beach will help sustain and support the many local businesses we have down here. This rezoning is part of that solution. Please vote yes on the public site rezoning today. Thank you. 6 voicemails Mr. Roach will read into the record or play into the record. I have a letter of support from another out-of-city resident from Boynton Beach. They are in support of the project. I have a letter from Adriana Luchecko. She is in opposition of the project. Related group fails to provide the full scope of density plans encompassing the entire square block in question. Only submitting and approving partial scope does not provide transparency to the neighboring communities nor to the planning board. Further, the public delivery entrance being on a busy street such as Fern across from West Way, which also is designed for delivering to the proposed 575 Rosemary building, and West Way designed for entrance exit to the Sapadillo garage will cause immeasurable traffic congestion and pedestrian safety issues on Fern Street. Further still, requesting a variance from 15 stories to now 25 is unacceptable. Wind studies suggest that such height will result in a wind tunnel on Fern and potentially all the City Place townhomes situated across the street. I have another letter of support from a Jupiter resident, Caleb Duke. A letter of support from Ashley Amian. Dear members of the planning board, I am in full support of the Rosemary Square zoning change to allow the public site up to 25 stories. I frequent Rosemary Square often for both work and for fun. As a young professional, I am currently in the market for a new home for rent or purchase. Rosemary Square is the type of location I'm looking for, a place that I can work, play, and enjoy all of that South Florida has to offer. I worry about safety, walkability, and quality of life issues. Creating a dense urban environment with active residents walking, shopping, and working will help create an environment that is attractive to me and others looking for that lifestyle. I understand that zoning change will help ensure a full-size grocery store that can be located in downtown. That would be fantastic if the city could make that happen. Please vote yes on the zoning change. Thank you. I have another letter of support from Ryan Wagwaspak, and he is a resident of Jupiter. He is in support of the project. I have another letter of support from a resident of Green Acres, James Ring. And finally, I have a letter of opposition from David Bradley. And that is it.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Roach, will you play for us those recorded messages?
Yes, first, actually, I'd like to have the 5 people here in City Hall provide their comments. So if you just give me 1 second.
Okay.
Should be able to.
And Mr. Roach, is it possible to bring them all in at once so we could swear them all in together rather than swear each one individually?
I don't know how I'll be able to get them all on camera at the same time.
Or just for the swearing in part?
Okay, hold on just 1 second. I don't know if you, yeah, if you can all,
Just for the swearing in portion.
if everybody can go in, you'll need to be sworn in, so you'll just look at the screen, raise your right hand.
I'm just seeing one individual. If a little more, that'd be great.
Oh, Elena.
Get stand.
Can you see yourself?
There you go. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you so much. All right, sir, you may state your name and proceed.
My name is Tom Lindley. You heard my email comment read by Ms. White. So I support those comments entirely and do not propose to repeat them. I wanted to speak to be able to follow up on the full scope of the project and to discuss briefly the conditions. John Hicksonbaugh and Eric Schneider have both emphasized what related in its proposal states and the staff report acknowledges, that this whole project covers the block from Rosemary to Sapodilla and from Fern to Avernia. The conditions imposed by the staff report and in fact the large publics are dependent upon this being a full block. I do not oppose that. I am here as an attorney who supports urban density, but wants to mitigate some of the comparatively awkward or bad aspects of it. That is why I'm seeking the 2 additional conditions. One is that, as you know, the Fern Street is already a traffic mess. It's going to get much worse with the Macy's, and in the design that Related prepares, the level 3 site plan that Related prepares, it should be guided by the conditions that staff have put in and that I am suggesting. One of those is that the truck entrance be placed on Avernia or potentially Sapodilla, but not on Fern. For all the reasons Related already owns properties to the north. It put the 360 building truck entrance on Avernia and so on. Second, with respect to the height, we truly appreciate the fact that the city planner and Related are proposing that the height be east of the townhomes. But this building is proposed to be more than 60 feet taller than the 360 building. They're talking about floors, but its height is proposed to be 300, whereas the 360 building is around 240. So it's a 60-foot taller building positioned directly on that corner. Because this is a full lot, full block development, it is comparatively easy to put in a condition that Related be asked to shift that building tower slightly to the north, keep it on the east side, but shift it over the soon to be vacated alley so that it is even further back from the townhomes and more closely aligned with the 360 building and its setbacks from Fern Street. That should alleviate a lot of the wind tunnel, heat sink, and all other pollution and ambiance of life issues by that simple shift. Thank you for letting me speak, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, sir. Please come forward and state your name for the record.
Not hearing Mr. Myers.
My name is Lola Scoby. I'm a resident at 640 Fern. I'm a full-time year-round resident and part of the City Place townhomes. All of us I also hold 2 certificates in sustainability and sustainable design. And all of us, including all of you who are conversant with sustainable design, know the importance of thinking in systems. We know that if we narrow our vision and just think about one part of a situation at a time, we're leaving rooms for problems that may be developing within the entire system, but are very easy to overlook. So I want to focus my remarks on one negative possibility that I think this planning board, Related, and all of our citizens and voters who live in City Place townhomes do not want to happen. As the representative from Related pointed out, there are going to be many tall buildings in this area over time. And City Place Townhomes is right at the heart of all of that, all of that development. Already running down our entire east border from Fern Street to Hibiscus is a service alley. Even during the quiet of the quarantine, there was significant noise from the alley, people zooming through the alley at 2 a.m. in the morning, bringing their boom boxes. Then at 5 a.m., you have the dump trucks arriving with all their bells and whistles, waking everybody up. Already, this is being experienced, and soon, right down the alley, we will have a tall building built on the Macy's site that's going to do nothing but make every bit of this 10 times worse. Now, there is a proposal across the street on Fern to put a service entrance to a full-size grocery store right at the mouth of that alley. I don't know if they intend to bring semi-trailer trucks all the way down the alley across Fern and into the entrance, or how all that is planned out. But what it means is that your development that's right at the heart of all this growth is basically on 2 sides, the back door for other development. The negative possibility that I'm concerned about happening right here in the heart of things is that if this incessant traffic, noise at all hours increases, that City Place Townhomes is going to become known as not a place where high-end buyers want to buy. And we just heard a letter from a young woman who is looking to buy. It could easily gradually sink into becoming rental property. And because of the noise and traffic problems that become spread by word of mouth, possibly rented at below market rates. Because it's near Rosemary Square's bar, wonderful bars, and the Comada Street wonderful entertainment district, it has a strong possibility of becoming what's known as a party complex. And I think, as all of us know, in a party complex, you start seeing maintenance not being done, rundown conditions, generally raucous living going on, lots of stuff on the streets. It could actually even become a drug source for other high-end neighbors in high-end buildings around this townhouse complex. So to prevent this possibility, which I know none of us want, but actually is quite realistic, because it would be a desirable place to be for those who can't afford market rate rents and other aspects, I would ask that you support the two previous conditions that have been suggested, that you do not allow the location of the industrial service entrance to the grocery store to be on Fern Street, right across from the end of the alley, but not on Fern Street at all, that the entire building be moved back from the street further on toward the center of the lot to give more open air and open space and better experience on the street. And that also you require a matter that was brought up extensively in the hearing on the Macy's building, and that is that Related commit to specific things to beautify that huge long service alley between Fern and Hibiscus, and to put in traffic slowing measures to keep people from zooming through that alley that's a block long that they love to zoom through in the early morning and late hours of the day. By correcting these issues, we believe that City Place can indeed be preserved as the way it is now and keep rising in value. We appreciate all the good sustainable design features that have been worked into the design at this point, but we do think this potential systemic downside of where the parts are placed relative to one another could create a real problem in the heart of this marvelous growing area of West Palm Beach.
All right, thank you, ma'am. We normally
Thank
keep
you.
these comments to 3 minutes, and
Thank
forgive us for not keeping better track of that. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Who wishes to speak next?
Do you see me?
We sure can.
Hi, Mr. Mines. It's nice seeing you again. Mr. Royer. Jordan, it's nice seeing you too.
Please state your name for the record, sir.
My name is David Bradley, and I am the former president of the Town Homeowners Association. But I am here in my individual capacity, and I don't speak for all the townhomes. It was interesting to hear that people from Green Acres, Boynton Beach, and Jupiter are in favor of the project. What you haven't heard is people from the townhomes coming in and supporting the project. Everything that you've heard from the townhomes is that the people in the townhomes who are going to be immediately adjacent to the project oppose it. We don't oppose growth. We don't oppose development. We don't oppose Related. We don't oppose working with Related. We don't oppose working with the other businesses in the area to have a positive growth and development in the area. We were here a little over a year ago when the Macy's site was being proposed. And at that time, it was decided that we would work together and come up with an agreement, and we did. That agreement was us supporting the fact that there would be a limitation of 15 stories on the public site. We stood up and we supported that at that time. Nothing has changed in the last period of time between then and now to say that there is a necessity for an additional 10 stories. That therein lies the rub. You brought us up to 15 stories. We didn't like it, but we agreed. There were concessions and agreements made, and now another 10 stories is being required without any considerations being given to the townhomes or the problems that the construction itself will entail. What was particularly offensive about the site plan, and I don't know if Mr. Schneider can put up the traffic plan from the city site plan, but the traffic plan has the entrances for the loading docks right off of Fern. I live across the street from the Fern Publix and the Fern Publix parking lot. I don't want a loading dock across the street from my house. Nobody who lives on Fern wants a loading dock across the street from their house. In addition to that, you have a letter of support from Dreyfus, but what the Dreyfus letter probably doesn't tell you is that the Dreyfus students every morning and every afternoon walk down Fern to get to Publix. There are people from the Metropolitan that walk down Fern to get to Publix. There are people in the Garden Apartments that walk down Fern to get to Publix. If you're going to put a service entrance for this entire structure on Fern, you're going to be creating a great deal of hazard for the people who live there, as well as an increase in traffic. It's going to be unbearable. Publix isn't the only business that is going to be serviced by that entranceway. You'll not only be servicing a 40,000 square foot grocery store, you're going to have another bakery business that's in there. You have planned restaurants that are going to be in there. There's an assisted living facility that's going to have to be serviced, and that's going to increase tenfold the amount of trucks that now come in through Fern to service that one simple Publix store. It's not a great idea now. We tolerate it. It'll be intolerable if that has to continue into the future. We are absolutely opposed to that. Everybody that you have heard from today is asking you to please move the service entrance either to Sappadilla or Elyria.
I thank you, sir. We appreciate your comments.
All right.
We have 3 minutes. We're 4.5 minutes already into it. Next speaker, please.
Hello, good
Please state your
evening.
name for the record.
My name is Claudia Sands, and my public comments were already read by Hope White, and thank you, Hope. However, I would also like to echo the comments of Tom, Lola, and David this evening in terms of this development. And at this time, I do not support the additional 10-story allocation. I've been living in West Palm for over 10 years, and part of the reason why I purchased here was that it had a 5-story zoning maximum. Now, I do understand that things change over time, but the townhomes were originally part of that entire Rosemary Square district, and we were one of the first residents to invest in the community. And certainly have enjoyed the amenities that Related has built in terms of Rosemary Square, have supported the restaurants as best as we could throughout COVID and throughout the many years. We've enjoyed the existing Publix location, which has truthfully provided all of the food that I needed. And while maybe a fuller grocery store would be nice, for those things that I would rather support the restaurants locally as well, that my cooking maybe is not measured up to. So we do have other choices as well of other groceries that are not far away, with Whole Foods and Target and other Publix that are, a short drive away. So yes, we would, like a larger grocer, but certainly the amenities of the entire Rosemary Square and by supporting the shops and restaurants is also critical. And many city residents do not, are not using that grocer, and hoping to support other businesses. I also concur that having a loading dock entrance is not desirable from both an aesthetic and a safety viewpoint. For residents that have invested in the city, they do not want a loading dock outside of their front doors. It's definitely not desirable. That should be in another part of the site plan. And part of my comments really concentrated on how different plots of land are rezoned currently, and that we tend to look at things, or the city tends to look at things from a sub-area silo instead of looking at the entire site plan project. And it was extremely important that site plans for the entire project should include, from the very beginning of the project, traffic studies, safety studies, wind studies, sunlight studies, sinkhole studies, and noise pollution, because these are the everyday things that will affect all of the residents that enjoy the city and that selected West Palm as a city, because it did have a certain amount of charm. It was both sort of a big little city.
All right, members, you could please conclude your comments. You've been given 3 minutes here, and you also had your written comments read into the record as well.
All righty. Well, thank you for your consideration, Stephen, and thank you tonight.
All right, thank you. Who else wishes to be heard?
Hi, how are you?
Please state your name for the record.
I'm the last person, so. My name is Helena Khoshnevis. I wrote an email. I didn't know they're gonna read it, but so I'll make it very short. First, I want to say thank you for your time and consideration. The only thing that I'm pretty much asking the city to do to look at related the whole project as a whole, not just the publics, because as we know, this project going to extend all the way to Sapedella. And so now we're going to have Macy's that is going up. And now then we have the office building across the street and the publics that they are requesting. So right now we have a hard time even getting to the townhouses because of that office building is closing the road all the time. The second thing is I'm requesting a traffic, wind, flood, sinkhole study to be done, a true study considering all the buildings that are going up in a near future. And this should be done by the city, or if it's done by the builder, it has to be really look at it carefully. The height of the building is really neither proper or safe for our area, nor the townhouses, which is across the street. We're gonna have congested population, environmental pollution, reduced citizen access to the fresh air and sunlight. We should have a new evacuation plan for hurricane and emergency use due to the population and congestion in the area, and obviously a stronger wind that is created by all these high rises. We had some kind of an agreement with Related a couple of years ago due to building the Macy's. So I'm hoping, so far we haven't seen anything yet. So I'm hoping Related do some kind of an action to keep the townhouses happy. I understand the revenue that Related bring to the city is important, but at the same time, I'm hoping the city think about do the right decision and keep our city unique as it is now, and don't let the townhouse to become a South Wall Street, as they call it now. So this is what I heard, South Wall Street. Thank you for your time and everything. Thank you. Bye.
All right. I want to give the applicant a chance to respond to some of the things we heard, but before you do that.
I do have 3 people.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's right, John. Why don't you go ahead and play those for us first?
Okay, I'm going to promote all 3 of them at once, but then we'll do one at a time. Just give me 1 second.
Sure.
So I just brought in Joanne, Faustina, and John. So they'll just need to unmute, turn on their cameras to be sworn in, and then we can start with Joanne first.
I'm so sorry. I'm confused now. I thought these were pre-recorded or not. These are live.
I do have 6 voicemails as well, but these are people live on Zoom who wish to speak.
I understand. All right. So are they on now so I can swear them in, or do you want to do these individually?
I've promoted them all to panelists, so they should be able to unmute and turn on their cameras.
All right. For those who wish to be heard, I would ask that you unmute yourselves and turn on your camera so I can swear you in.
Okay,
1, 2, and who's the third?
me.
I'm sorry,
Why
who's
can't I
the
do this?
um, you need to activate your camera.
I'm trying.
Okay, if you look in the bottom left corner of your screen, assuming you're
Start
using the
video.
desktop, yes, there you go. There you go.
Start.
Let's see if it fires up here for you.
No problem.
Start
I
video.
don't yet see you.
Start video. What's going on?
You have me at a loss.
I'm
So
lost.
there was a red circle through it, and then you clicked it, and that circle went away.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. You don't have like a lens cover or something like that on it.
No,
Okay.
I don't know what's happening. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but our rules require that you have a video stream.
Okay, start
I
my
just wanted-
video. I'm saying it, but it's not happening.
I understand. Can someone give her assistance, John?
I'm
You-
trying, yes. Just a moment.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I suggest we maybe hear from the other two persons
Yes.
while she's working with that?
Fair enough. For those two, and Joanna, I want you to raise your right hand as well.
Fine, no problem, I will, thank you.
Okay, raise your right hand, those who wish to speak. Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be truthful? And there you are, you just joined. You did it in time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, why don't we just go down the line? Ms. Guerrero, why don't you begin, please? Do you hear me?
Ms. Guerrero.
Can you hear Ms. Guerrero?
Ms. Guerrero.
Oh, Guerrero, I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right, can you
Sorry.
please
Hi.
state your name, which we can see, and then give us your comments?
Sure, my name is Faustina Guerrero, and I live in the City Place Townhomes at 650 Fern Street. I am the current treasurer of the board, but I am speaking as an individual. There are 51 units here, and everybody who's spoken has only spoken as an individual. We have had many conferences on this building, but we do not at this time have anything uniform. I am in support of the building. I am speaking for myself as a homeowner that lives here full time. I have 4 students or 4 children, and 3 of them have gone to Dreyfus. I sent an email, but it wasn't read. But again, I am in support of the building. All the concerns that my other homeowners have discussed are the same things. We would really like the planning committee to look at this site as a full block, as a full project, so that that north part of the project can be also zoned properly. We would love for that tower to be moved a quarter block north, straddling the alley, the current alley, because that would give more of a setback to Fern Street. And it would also help mitigate the wind effects that we perceive might happen with a tower that's 250 feet. It would also match the existing structure with the office tower across the street. The winds do come from the south and the east. So again, that really would help, I believe. We have concerns about the loading zone on Fern, but I do want to point out that currently, we all did choose to live in an urban setting, and that comes along with height, and that comes along with loading zones. I don't know of any city that does not have those things. I live here, so I would prefer that it's not on Fern, but I think, speaking for myself, I chose to live in an urban setting. I love that there's going to be a full-scale Publix. I love the restaurants. I love what Related has done. I know that they are working with us, and the setbacks and the tiered design of the building. So I can hope that the city and Related will continue to work with us on those issues. So the Fern, the height, the existing setback of 96 feet, I just also want to confirm that that is from the north curb of Fern that is existing. I don't want that curb to be moved further south. Because I do think that the width of that street is essential for future growth. And I think that you need to keep the current parking, which is like a diagonal head-in. I think you need to keep parking on Fern Street as well. So those are my comments.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. White, can we hear from you next?
I just want to make sure that the whole approval is based on having the other approval on the where you plan to pull the Publix.
Sir, this is your chance to make comments. We're not here to answer your questions just now. So any other comments?
No,
you wish
no,
to make?
I want to make sure that the approval is subject to the being able to move the Publix to the other area that you're not regulatory on. And why should we approve this development unless we know that it's available?
All right, any other comments you
Okay.
have? All right, thank you, sir. Ms. Sirocco.
Good evening, members of the board. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. I promise I'll be brief and short. My name is Joanne Sirocco, and I live in West Palm Beach. My family visits Rosemary Square a lot, and we enjoy the atmosphere and the amenities that it has to offer. I appreciate the vision this board has previously shown with respect to this project, and I hope that you will join me in supporting the zoning of the downtown public site from 15 stories to 25 stories, so more families like mine can enjoy the advantage of all our downtown has to offer. We need to keep attracting more people to live and spend time in our downtown area. Offering amenities like a full-size grocery store and more housing will do just that. The added density will also bring more support to our downtown businesses and shops. And please vote yes and rezone the public site from 15 to 25 stories. I thank you all so very much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. John, do you want to now, what we have left are the recorded comments?
Yes, I have 6 of those. Just give me 1 second.
Sure.
Good afternoon. I'm calling in support of the Planning Board Case 1, the amendment change to the Rosemary Square public site. My name is Rachel Davis Carlson, and I'm in full support of the public site rezoning from 15 to 25 stories. I've lived all over the country from New York to LA, and now just around the corner from downtown West Palm in land of the presidents. Rosemary Square is a magical place full of the best in terms of dining, retail, and entertainment. We need to support those businesses, and allowing for additional people to live, work, and play in Rosemary Square is needed. Please approve this height increase at the public site. It will add so much more to what we have today. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Daniela. I'm calling regarding the rezoning for the Publix. I am in complete support of them building the Publix and to go up 25 stories. I live in the flats, and I meet a lot of my clients and my business in Rosemary Square. It only makes sense. I'm in complete support of the rezoning and allowing Publix to be built in Rosemary Square, going up 25 stories. It makes complete sense. Again, my name is Daniela, 561-374-1129, and I am in support of the rezoning of Publix in Rosemary Square. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tom Sirocco, and I'm calling in reference to the public site zoning change. I am asking that you vote to approve the change from 15 to 25 stories because our downtown needs this growth in order to attract more people, which will support our local downtown businesses and shops. Again, please vote to approve the rezoning of public site from 15 to 25 stories. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Marissa Navarro. I'm calling to ask that you support the zoning of the public site near City Place. A full-size Publix is really needed for residents who live downtown. Also, allowing the change will add more workforce housing to the area. I respectfully ask the planning board to vote yes to make this happen. Thank you for your time.
2 more.
Hi, my name is Catherine Christie.
I'm calling in reference to the zoning of public site from 15 to 25 stores. I fully support of this zoning change, and have a full-size Publix in the downtown is something that is long overdue. We need to attract more people to the downtown to help our businesses succeed, and zoning change would do just that. Please vote yes on the zoning change at the public site.
And one more.
Hi, my name is Grace Berg. I'm calling in reference to today's board meeting regarding the zoning of the public site from 15 to 25 stories. Members of the planning board, I'm calling today to express my full support of this zoning change. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend in person due to COVID concerns. However, as someone who works downtown and enjoys the restaurants and shops and entertainment options in the city, I believe this zoning change is part of the continued success for West Palm Beach. So, I often would go and grab dinner after work or grab lunch in Rosemary Square. And I think having a full-size Publix downtown would be an amazing amenity for our city to have, and one that is sorely needed. We need more density and more people in our downtown core to support a full-size grocery store and the restaurants currently downtown. So please vote yes on the zoning change at the public site. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
And Mr. Chair, that concludes public comment.
All right, thank you so much. Before we give the applicant a chance to respond to some of the things they heard and some questions we may wish to place with the applicant, I just want a clarification. I know whether that should come from Mr. Thomas or whether that should come from Mr. Schneider or Mr. Green. I just want to clarify exactly what it is we're going to be voting on today, particularly with respect to things like they're asking, like the location of loading zone and all these other factors. Is that part of what we're considering today, or would that come back later as part of a site plan, or what? I just want to be clear. Some of a lot of the issues raised are legitimate issues. I didn't know whether we're supposed to reach all those today or not. If someone could give me some clarification, I'd welcome it.
Eric here. If you wanted to impose a condition of no loading or no vehicle access to Fern Street or Rosemary or Avernia or Sapodilla, well, actually not, you couldn't do it to Avernia, but no access to the portions that are within the Rosemary Square development that are covered by the CPD, you could surely do that. And then the city commission would have to make the final decision if that was part of giving them the extra 10 stories. Just like we said, you have to have a 40,000 square foot full service grocer. If you approved it with a provision that you couldn't access off of Fern, that will get looked at the time of site plan where the access is. If you put the condition in now, then they wouldn't be able to put the loading on Fern, though I would imagine that they are not going to be in support of that and would ask the city commission to overrule that.
And with respect to the concerns raised about traffic or concern raised about wind shear and other things like that too, is that appropriately considered today, or would that come before us later?
That would be at the time of the building and based on the design of the building. The traffic, they do need they were required to provide a traffic impact study for the building at Macy's, and that was our engineering department required it for that building. They will also presumably be doing it as part of this the new building.
But then they were not required to present that today for part of
No, they're not required to present it because there's no actual construction going on, no building being approved.
Understood. I just want to get that clarified. Thank you so much, Eric. All right. I think now would be appropriate, Mr. Oyer, you and your people, if you heard a number of different things and some specific requests, I'll give the opportunity to respond however you see appropriate.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll keep this brief because I think the overwhelming majority of the comments that were not supportive or raising concerns all go to the level 3 site plan issue, which is not before you tonight. Should we get lucky enough to get a lease with Publix and come back to you, all of those issues, of course, would be addressed and all of the code required studies would be provided. So I think that addresses most of them. Uh, I did want to state, because someone brought up the prior agreement between Related and the townhomes for Macy's. I want to be clear that Related has performed every bit of that, either on time or ahead of schedule. Parts of it have not been performed because it was tied to the building permit for the Macy's site, which has not yet been issued. So we've worked very cooperatively with this townhome association in the past. We are committed to do so going forward. They were the very first group of folks in the community that we brought this idea to. Jordan, who can speak for himself, has had multiple communications with them. We, of course, are committed to work all of this out prior to City Commission. Any issues that pertain to this change in the zoning regulations, and of course would work with them as we have in the past on any site plan approval that may come forward in the future. And we do appreciate their working with us. And as one of the speakers said, they all elected to move into an urban environment, and it's going to become more urban, which has always been part of the city's downtown master plan. We just never had the demand to be as urban as we're proposing to be. So none of this is coming as a big change or surprise to anyone. This is, quite frankly, what we have all dreamed of and planned for a couple of decades, and we're delighted we now have the opportunity. And I hope that the neighbors want to stay and be a part of it. I understand that urban living is not for everyone, which is why the city offers so many different housing types, from large acreage properties out west to zero lot lines and estate homes and duplexes and high-rise towers. So there's something for everyone in West Palm Beach, and we hope that you choose to stay here in what will be an even more urban environment. The one part that we cannot address, that I heard from a couple of speakers, is shifting the height of the building further north. And that is because the DMP district to the north doesn't permit anything more than 10 stories. Otherwise, I think that is something that Related could entertain. That's not within our control. That would require a comp plan amendment, which can only be initiated by the city staff and the DMP. So if there's an appetite to do that, we would certainly participate in it. But otherwise, as I started out by explaining, this is a challenging site. Half of the property is in the City Place DRI, the other half in the DMP. And if that alley were to be abandoned, right at the center line of that alley is where it would split. So if it's a 15-foot alley, 7.5 feet would go into the DRI and 7.5 feet would go into the DMP. And those are the regulations we have to live with. The reason the height is going on the DRI side, as you know, Mr. Chair, and probably most of your board members, there is no inherent height limitation in the DRI. It is completely within the discretion of the City Commission. By contrast, in the DMP, there are very fixed height limitations that are immutable. There is no variance procedure to get additional height. So I just wanted to make that clear. It's nothing that anyone on this call can fix or change. It is what it is. And it's one of the many challenges we face in trying to deliver what everyone wants on the site, which is why we come to you now twice seeking changes to the design guidelines and regulations for Rosemary Square. So I'm happy to try to answer any questions. I know Jordan would be as well. We appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you so much. Does any board member have any questions, either of the applicant or of staff, before we take it back to the board for discussion and vote? And if there are no questions, then we will conclude the evidentiary portion of this proceeding and bring it to the board for discussion. Let me first ask initial thoughts, and then I'm going to call on everyone and see what your views are, and then we'll call a vote. Any initial comments from any of the board members? Impressions? Views?
Yeah.
If not, let me just let me go. I'll go to my vice chair first. Peter, what are your thoughts on this in terms of?
I think that your earlier question is valid. This is a rezoning application, not a site plan application. And I'm sure staff are going to be very sensitive to the issue of the loading docks. And I'm sure they're going to try and mitigate visually, the issue of the loading dock. But looking at the overall project, I think that the density and the height is well justified to offset the cost of the above ground parking, which is very expensive, and the cost to build the Publix and the cost to provide workforce housing. So I think that the application is appropriate for this particular site.
I thank you. John, since you've moved up so much in seniority over the past few meetings, what are your thoughts?
Well, I guess there's a site plan floating out there that people have looked at because people are talking about aspects of it, but we aren't privileged to seeing that. So we don't know anything about a site plan, and that's not before us today. Initially, when I reviewed the staff report, I was feeling a little uncomfortable because I would prefer to see a site plan concurrent with the rezoning application. So because it's a little speculative, I'm not opposed. In concept, I don't have any opposition to increase height or anything like that. But I do think that special treatment is going to have to be given to the Fern Street elevation of this project to make sure that the context of this street isn't adversely impacted by the project. And if the idea is to have two loading zones where 18-wheelers are pulling down Fern Street and just backing up into two loading bays into that street, and then that's just basically going to become the de facto service alley, that's going to be a problem for me. So if the staff feels that we still have sufficient controls at the site plan level, then I'm comfortable supporting the request. But I want to see something creative and something spectacular on that Fern Street side. And that doesn't mean just a big open hole in the side of the building with 18-wheelers backing up into it all day and basically Fern Street becoming the de facto alley that they're proposing to vacate. Because the service center, we already have an alley in this block that was intended to serve that purpose, proposing to vacate it, to consolidate the block. But the idea that we're now just going to make Fern Street the de facto alley for this development is of concern to me. And I think those concerns that have been raised are really valid. Those folks, the idea when we build an urban street, it's context on both sides of the street, not just one side of the street. So I'm inclined to support that application without conditions. But I want it to be known that, I want to see something brilliant on that Fern Street elevation to address the concerns and to scale and whatnot. And if we still have those controls at the site plan approval level, then I'm comfortable moving forward.
Thank you so much, John. Andre, you're muted, just to remind you. What are your thoughts? Unmuted thoughts.
So, I think that downtown West Palm Beach is desperate for a much larger, at least a more efficient hub there and where it is now. I definitely understand the concerns of residents not wanting loading docks across the street. That would definitely turn me off if I were living there as well. But like you said, there was someone who spoke about, you move downtown, you have to expect that these kinds of changes, although not apparent when they first moved in, it's a growing city, and you have to acknowledge that downtowns grow and they get more dense. That said, I don't think that there's also there isn't problems or solutions, and the way to maybe get these stores stocked. Maybe they can find smaller trucks. I'm sure there's other instances where they don't have the ability to bring in 18-wheelers. Maybe they can bring in smaller and split the deliveries, at 2 different times of the day to not pose such an impact on the downtown. So I think that's a detail that can get worked out. But again, we're talking about a zoning approval to change the zoning of this property, not talking about anything about site planning. I think this is putting the cart before the horse. And I think that said, I think that they can figure out how to make this project work for everybody's best interest. And I fully support the application.
Thank you so much. Deborah, your thoughts?
Listening to oh gee whiz, what happened to my screen? Okay, listening to the comments from the public, I fully support their concerns about the loading dock especially. I cannot imagine living there on Fern Street and seeing that happen. However, like you said, Steve, earlier, we're only here to make a determination for the rezoning. And I'm sure that the developer will take into, would like for the developer to take into consideration all of the concerns expressed. I know that I think it's another piece of property to the west, and so the service area and the loading dock, they're going to have to go somewhere. So hopefully in their development of the site plan, they will be very astute in looking at all the different possibilities of not overloading Fern, not overloading Sapodilla as well. It's a very tight area. We know density is going to increase. However, I believe that we are all looking forward to a much larger and full service Publix. But I don't think we need to trade off so many of the concerns that were brought forward tonight. So I support the plan for moving from 15 to 25 stories. I just think that in developing the site plan, that the developer needs to be cognizant of all the concerns brought forth tonight. Thank you.
I just want to have my own thoughts here, because I go back a ways. I remember when Clematis had made its first revival. I remember when City Place, as it was then known, first came into being, and there was enormous concern that that wonderful project may really do damage to the Clematis district. And a lot of effort was made to mitigate that, including the repaving of Rosemary, having the free trolleys, things like that. But we recognize that our downtown was divided into 2 distinct separate areas, the Clematis district and Rosemary Square. And the planning and the hope and the expectation was that the center of the new downtown would be between those 2 places to tie it all in together. So when we said, where do we want our tall buildings? We wanted it exactly where this one's going. So it was always the plan that we were going to encourage tall buildings. And I think, as Mr. Oyer correctly points out, the only reason it didn't happen, there wasn't the market demand for it. That's all. We're fortunate that changed. I have sympathy for those on those townhouses. On the other hand, this is where the new downtown, the tall buildings, were always supposed to be located. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. There are things we can do and should do to mitigate the impact on them. But to change the vision for our downtown, I don't think we can do. So to me, this deserves our full support. This is exactly what we wanted to have happen. It is occurring now. And I think it deserves our support. So having heard everyone's comments, I didn't hear anyone necessarily saying they intend to object to this. So I'm going to look for a motion for approval.
I will move approval of planning board case number 950AAAA.
I think there's 6 of them, my friend. I counted. Were there any conditions that the staff had placed on it? I believe so.
Or were there conditions in the recommendation?
Yes. How many were there, Eric?
Just real quick, there's no conditions that everything's built into the regulations for the sub areas. So there's no specific condition you need to add. It's all already built into the zoning regulations.
All right, that's fine then. The way you propose is appropriate then, John. Have we a second to John's motion?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. That then brings us to the code revision cases, and we'll begin with case number 2104.
Give me 1 second. I'll bring in the applicants. Okay, that should be everybody for that application.
All right. For those who plan to speak or offer testimony, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be truthful?
Yes.
I thank you. If we could hear then from the applicant.
Actually, this was a case that staff is going to present.
Okay, if we could hear from the staff then.
Yeah, so let me share my screen here real quick. Great. So this originally started as the applicant had turned in a building permit for to convert the pharmacy across the street from City Hall on Clematis Street, or not convert it, but add a veterinary clinic. Through the building permit process, it became clear when it was reviewed that veterinary clinics are not permitted on Clematis Street. There's a provision that they were specifically prohibited from Clematis Street. So that had the applicant initiate a request to allow veterinary clinics on Clematis Street. Well, as staff started reviewing the request, staff realized that holistically the it needed to be looked at. So my screen is not going. There we go. So section 94-106.8.13 governs veterinary clinics within the downtown, and specifically it prohibited them in two places: on the Clematis waterfront district, as well as along a portion of Dixie Highway north of Quadrille. And so it also covers veterinary clinics, pet grooming, animal daycare, and boarding facilities. So the Clematis waterfront district is shown in pink, or actually is in pink on this in outline in red here. This is so it's not they're not permitted here, and none of those uses are permitted here along Dixie Highway. Technically said north of between Lofton and Palm Beach Lakes, but it's now Quadrille Avenue. So as I mentioned, staff looked at those and determined that with the growth in the downtown, these uses of veterinary clinics, pet grooming, and pet boarding were necessary to have people not have to leave the downtown, get in their car and drive to South Dixie Highway, Park Avenue. There's the VIP down is the closest boarding. There may be some, and there's some other pet grooming places. So, and there's no veterinary clinics in the downtown. So what staff determined was that it was more appropriate to allow that. And I just highlight where the actual location is on Clematis Street there. So we determined that the regulations are too restrictive. So we're now proposing as part of this that veterinary clinics, pet grooming, animal daycare, and boarding facilities are permitted not only on the Dixie Highway portion I showed you before where they're currently prohibited, but also in the residential enclaves, except for the R sub-districts, and that's the residential sub-districts downtown. This whole section pertains to the downtown master plan. So it has gone to DAC. They have approved it. And because it is in the zoning and land development regulations, the planning board has to recommend approval. But you will not see any veterinary clinics that come forth based on these changes, just to let you know. So staff only permitting veterinary clinics and pet grooming on Clematis, not the animal daycare and boarding. And that's because of some of the more challenging aspects of having animal daycare and boarding, noise, the pickup and drop off that's required for animal daycare. And those staff felt were not appropriate along Clematis Street, but for the rest of the downtown. Also, those uses now are required to have a Class B special uses permit in the downtown. The rest of the city allows them outright unless you can't meet special requirements. So it automatically made it more difficult to put in this use in the downtown. So we're going to remove the requirement of Class B special use permits unless you can't meet some additional standards, which is similar to what we have outside of the downtown. And then we also found that the definition of clinic in section 94.611 did not allow overnight treatment of anything. So we added that animal treatment in veterinary clinics was allowed as part of the clinic definition. That will apply to the entire city, which is a conflict now with the city's veterinary allowance for boarding as well as the definition. So we're cleaning some stuff up. Is real quick on the language, taking out where it's not prohibited, adding in where it is. And then we added some additional standards to mirror what was outside of downtown, and allowing the Downtown Action Committee, who oversees Class B special use permits within the downtown, to allow facilities to have not an enclosed building if it's appropriate. That's the additional language there. We also added that the specific prohibition that cannot be waived about no daycare or boarding facilities allowed along Clematis Street. And then that they can specifically allow overnight boarding if animals are receiving treatments. That's the big thing, which any one of us that have animals, that if your dog, cat needs to be in there for overnight for treatment, that way it can stay here and doesn't have to be shipped off somewhere else after they had veterinary care downtown. And then we talked about having some animal daycare have some off-street parking or other facilities so that people don't have a place to park while they go pick up their animals. And that can be waived on a case-by-case basis by the Downtown Action Committee as a part of a Class B. And then the last one is the 94.611 language, where we allow veterinary clinics to provide outpatient overnight boarding. So that just takes that out of, takes the veterinary clinics and allows it. So anyway, recommend approval of the case as it meets all amendment standards found in section 9432 of the zoning and land development regulations. There were 5 letters of support in your backup material from Clematis business owners, to include the business owner immediately adjacent to the property that originally started this application process. And then, as I mentioned, the Downtown Action Committee, who will do the lion's share, if not all of it, recommended approval of the request after a public hearing. Are there any questions to staff? I know it's kind of a boring thing that for what you guys won't see in the future, but I'll open up for questions. And the applicant is here with some representatives if you have questions to them as well.
Okay, any questions of staff? Does anyone have any concerns about this proposal? Is anyone opposed to it? You know, to me, this is just a reflection of a point Mr. Oyer made at the last hearing. We've gone from 1,000 residents to 8,000 residents. As we continue to make the downtown a more livable, attractive place for residents, this is the type of thing they would want. So I think unless there's no questions, I think we can, and no one wishes to be heard from the public, we can probably call the question. Unless anyone has a concern or objection to this approach.
No. I'll move approval, Mr. Chairman, on based on the findings that the petition meets all 8 of the required amendment standards found in section 94-32 of the City of West Palm Beach zoning and land development regulations.
All right, thank you. We have a motion. Have we a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. A motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you so much. It passes unanimously. Thank you for coming. All right, it brings us to our final case. Code revision case 2103. And Mr. Thomas, I've been advised by Ms. Hope that because code revision is considered legislative, we don't have a need to swear in witnesses. Is that your understanding as well?
That's correct.
Okay, so no swearing in. We'll just get started. Who wishes to begin this? Staff, or do we want to hear from Mr. Oyer? Or I'll get recommendations.
Mr. Chair, the applicant will do the presentation first,
Okay.
and after staff has a small follow-up.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Okay, well, good evening. Again, for the record, Harvey Oyer of Schutzenbowen on behalf of the applicant. This is in the downtown master plan area, and because it is a code text amendment, it goes to both your board and DAC prior to going to the city commission. So that is your jurisdiction. First slide, please, Roger. We are proposing text amendments to 2 parts of the downtown master plan. The first one has to do with a sub-district called Quadral Business District 10-25, which I'll just call QBD 1025. This is the district. Don't ask me to explain why we created a sub-district 14 years ago that is bifurcated this way, but it is what it is. The north part of it is where the county juror parking garage and surface parking lot is located. That is not what we're discussing tonight, though the code revision would have, of course, apply to the entire sub-district. The area in question is the one to the south. It's that half block on the south side of Datura. It does not even go all the way through to Avernia Street. On the other side, facing Avernia Street to orient you, is the 25-story Park Line project. To the east is the Bright Line station, and to the west is Rosemary, just north of Rosemary Square. There are 4 parcels in this portion of the QBD 1025 subdistrict. The 3 that my client has 3 representatives on the call, all are available to address your questions. They have these 3 parcels under contract. Let me provide you a little backstory on the problem we're trying to solve for. This has always intended to be up to 25 stories in height and up to 6.5 in FAR. It has not developed. There's a reason it has not developed. It is owned by multiple property owners, so it was a challenge to get all of it under contract. The property is not large, as you can tell. It's only a portion of the northern half of the block. It has some attributes that are troubling for developers, such as a 25-story wall of the park line 15 feet across an alley on one side. So that's your view on one side. The view on the north side is the FPL substation. So you're looking down on transformers. Neither one of these conditions are going to go away anytime soon. And then you have a train that runs next to you on the east side. So not the most appealing development site. However, from a public policy perspective, it's very important what goes here, because when you come out the front door of the Bright Line station, this property together with the Park Line to the south are the welcome mat to the city of West Palm Beach. This is the first thing that someone who arrives via Bright Line sees when they step off the train. One half of that is already occupied by Park Line, which your view is a ventilated parking garage. So I don't want to speak for staff, but I think it's very important to them, to the city commission, to the DDA, to the CRA, what goes on this site, and that it is an appropriate welcome to West Palm Beach look when folks arrive here. So the client, who again is on the call, of course, would like to avail themselves of the additional height in FAR. And I imagine the city does as well, because once you underdevelop this site, you never really get to have a redo and go back and develop it to its full potential for a long period of time. So we've struggled with this almost for 2 years. How do you develop a site with these limitations? The only way to get to the higher FAR and height in the current code is to build either a 200,000 square foot Class A office building, a minimum 200,000 square foot, or a minimum 200 room full service hotel. And the code defines what a full service hotel is. It has a minimum amount of, exhibition or banquet space. So think of, the Marriott over by the Kravis Center. It's meant to host events, corporate events, Rotary Club meetings, Chamber of Commerce luncheons, something of that nature. Well, the geometry of this property does not lend itself to meeting either of those. It may be theoretically possible to fit them on these 3 lots, but practically speaking, by the time you set it back and have parking and access and try to put all that development program in, you cannot do it. We've tried. So that means it would be underdeveloped. So we made a proposal to the city, which fortunately staff is in agreement with, and we've socialized this with DDA and CRA, and they are supportive as well. And that is to make a minor surgical incision into the code to allow any type of hotel to meet the incentive requirement, which means a boutique hotel already defined in the code would now allow the additional height in FAR. Well, a boutique hotel, ladies and gentlemen, does fit on this small constrained site because it has a 100 room minimum and it doesn't have the banquet and exhibit space requirement. And quite frankly, our recent experience in the downtown has been that there is not a market demand for full service hotels. This is not the type of location that you'd have your business convention at. What we've seen do really well are boutique hotels, hip, trendy, uniquely outfitted, urban, vertical boutique hotels. The 2 examples that I think all of you will immediately recognize are the Ben and the Canopy, both of which are doing very well. And so that is the concept we'd like to propose. In order to accomplish that, we need to make a change to the code so that any type of hotel would qualify. Additionally, the code currently requires a minimum room size in hotels to be no less than 325 square feet. That is not only not the trend in boutique hotels, it also makes it difficult to develop this site. So we made a second request, and that is for boutique hotels only to reduce the minimum room size from 325 square feet to 275 square feet. So next slide, please, Roger. This is our request to allow boutique hotels to be eligible in QBD 1025 and 825. And you'll notice that these are 2 different sub-districts. And that's because when we proposed it in the 10-25 sub-district, the DAC asked that it also include the 825, which we are more than agreeable to, and staff is as well. So it would alter the incentive in both of these downtown sub-districts to allow boutique hotels, which are most likely the hotels that would be developed in these districts, not full service hotels. And secondly, as I already stated, reduce the minimum room size. Next slide, please, Roger. This is a similar perspective to what I gave you the first item on your agenda, so you can see where those sub-districts are. You can see that the 8-25 is to the south of us. It is that area along the west side of the FEC Railroad, east of Rosemary, all the way back down to Rosemary Square. So the blue 10-25 and the light purple 8-25 are the two sub-districts that would be affected by the proposed amendment. Next slide, please. So here is an actual red line of the code, so you can see how limited the text amendment is. This is the existing section 94-132, or a portion of it in the code, and you will see the deletion of "or a full service." So now it is a Class A office, a hotel, or residential development according to a different code section. So this would now open the door to any type of hotel, including boutique hotel, which is again already defined in the code. And you can see table 4-40A below, again, the deletion of the words full service. Otherwise, all the table regulations remain unchanged. Next slide, please. The second part of the request is the reduction of the hotel room size for boutique hotels only, not full service hotels, to be reduced from 325 square feet to 275 square feet. The bullet points beneath that give some reasoning for it, but we provided, I don't know, half a dozen to a dozen data points for the city staff. Newspaper articles, industry studies all stand for the proposition that the overwhelming trend in urban areas, including in South Florida, is that really vertical urban areas have boutique hotels with small room sizes. In fact, much smaller than the 275 square feet that we're proposing. Many of them go below 200 square feet. Next slide, please. These are just a couple of the data points that we gave to the city. You can see New York Times articles, USA Today articles. You can see highlighted in that USA Today article that they're averaging 200 square feet, 183 square feet, or even just 170 square feet, very small rooms in the boutique hotel. Why is that? Well, when a traveler comes to an urban environment, they didn't come here to stay in their room all day the way they might at a resort. They come here to get out on the street and enjoy the urban environment, Clematis Street, Rosemary Square, our cultural institutions. And folks, that's exactly where we want them. We want them out there on the street, spending their money in our downtown. And that's what a boutique hotel facilitates. Next slide, please. These are just some more articles that all stand for the same proposition, smaller room size. Next slide, please. Both of our requests comply with all of the amendment standards found in section 94-32A. I'm happy to go through them one by one, but I don't think there's any dispute or confusion over this. So why don't we skip over that and get directly to our request of you. And that is these two text amendments. They're fairly minor. Again, we've socialized them with the CRA, the DDA, the local merchants in the area. It conforms with the trend that we've seen with other hotels. It conforms with the national trend. We proposed the change just for the 10-25. Staff came back with including 8-25. We're fine with that. It has a staff recommendation for approval. And last week on May 12th, we received unanimous DAC approval for the identical request. And the final slide that I'd like to put up, or final two slides, gives you a flavor for what we're trying to accomplish here. This is a ground level site plan of the site, even though today or this evening is only a code amendment. It's not a site plan, which of course will go back to DAC for full site plan review at a later date. But this is the concept. The entire street front facing the train station being fully activated. So you'll see on the Datura Street side, the hotel and a residential lobby, and it blends right into a restaurant. And I can give you an example of this that will help you to visualize it. If you walk into the Bin Hotel, on your left is your check-in. On your right is a bunch of cool furniture and decorations where you can hang out. Then there's a bar where you can hang out, and then there's a restaurant, and they're all integrated together. They all flow together. They're not compartmentalized in any way. The same concept here, free-flowing human activity spilling out onto the sidewalk dining. So the welcome to West Palm Beach is almost like stepping off many of the train stations in Europe, where there's a sidewalk cafe and human engagement in the public realm that greets you, or you arrive half an hour early for your train and you can sit on the sidewalk and have a cappuccino. Much more engaging than the other half of the welcome mat, the ventilated parking garage. So this is what we're trying to accomplish, and this proposed text amendment or two amendments would allow that to happen. And the final slide is really just some mood images that come from our architect that give you a feel for what kind of environment we're trying to create in the public realm as you step out of the train station. So, Mr. Chairman and board members, that concludes our presentation. Again, we have all of the principals of my client, the developer, on the line and available to answer questions that I'm not capable of answering. With that, I'm happy to try to answer any questions that I can answer.
Okay, any questions of the applicant? And if not, let's hear from Anna Marie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to share my screen and do a brief presentation for this. Okay. As the chair mentioned for the previous case, the QBD incentive was created in 2009 to fill the hole in the donut, what it was called the hole in the donut, to try to put together Clematis Street and Rosemary Avenue, or what was City Place before. So the incentives were created. I highlighted the boundaries of the incentive area. So as it was mentioned also, it not only includes the Quadro Business District 10 to 25, but also the Quadro Business District 8 to 25. And that's the reason why staff was recommending that the proposed changes to allow the boutique hotel included also the 8 to 25. The good news with this request is that the vision to put together or fill the hole on the donut, it's being materializing. Basically, it's being materialized right now. We see the 360 Rosemary being constructed and almost finished. We have the All Aboard Florida station. We have the Parkland Beaches completed also. And we feel at this point, after almost more than 10 years since the vision was created, the city does not need to incentivize the construction of any more Class A office buildings or hotel, full service hotels in this area. So when the applicant presented his request in February to allow a boutique hotel in this area, in addition to the full service hotel that the incentive allows, the staff was already working on modifying the code and basically remove any restriction for the specific uses within this district. The intention and what we are working right now, and you saw last month, the request to create the new workforce housing incentive for the downtown. Part of the request includes basically we're going to remove any specific use incentives for this particular QBD district, allow the intensity of development as it was originally conceived, 6.5 FAR and 25 stories, but without restrictions. So any developer could acquire TDRs and build a project in this district with that intensity of development. What has happened is we're already doing that process, but we need additional time to put the details for these requests and finalize all the regulations for the workforce housing incentive. So the details have not been presented in front of the Downtown Action Committee or the Planning Board. We are working on that and trying to make the schedule for the June meetings. But the applicant decided that they needed to move ahead with their own request. So staff supports that because it is consistent with what the vision for the city at this point is. A boutique hotel is consistent to trying to incentivize the development in intensity in this core district next to the train station. So we don't have an issue with that, and we fully support that. We don't have any issue either with the reduction of the size for the boutique hotels. If the market is gearing that the boutique hotels have smaller rooms, we are not here to oppose to that market demand. So staff supports the changes to allow the boutique hotel with the federal business district incentive. One thing that I want to clarify, it will be for both incentive areas, the 8 to 25, but also the 10 to 25. I want to clarify that the language in the code is still states that the city-owned TDRs may be transferred no cost as an incentive. However, at this point, the city does not have any TDRs to offer to a private development. So the developer is allowed under the same language to acquire the TDRs in the private market according with the corresponding builder requirement table. So the language is still there, as I mentioned, to offer the TDRs at no cost, but the city does not have anything to offer. When we come back with the amendments for the workforce housing, we will clear up that language and remove that that specific language from there, because the city does not intend to incentivize, at this point, it's not necessary to incentivize those particular uses and offer TDRs at no cost.
I'm sorry, just want to interject also. The reason, to Harvey's point, the reason the Quadro Business District was bifurcated is because we've got the Clematis Waterfront District running through that whole corridor. So it separates the Quadro Business District to the north and south. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, yes, that's true. That is the reason. We have the Clematis Waterfront District in the middle.
It's so nice you said
the height was not appropriate for the Clematis Waterfront District. So that's why it was separated. So based on the information that was presented, staff worked with the applicant on modifying the initial proposal by the applicant, and the language that is included in your staff reports. The applicant had agreed with the modifications from staff. We recommend approval for the Code Revision 2103 based on the findings as the petition proposed amendment complies with all the amendment standards found in section 9432 of the Zoning and Land Development Regulations. As Mr. Royer said, it was approved by the Downtown Action Committee on May 12 on an unanimous vote, and this will be presented to the City Commission on first reading on June 28th. That concludes the staff presentation.
Okay, any questions of staff? And if not, John, do we have anyone from the public who wishes to be heard?
Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any interest in public comment, no.
Okay, well, let me bring it to the board. Does anyone have any concerns that they wish to discuss concerning this application? You know, to me, some of these boutique hotels bring a lot of character to a city, you know, some of the most memorable places, as opposed to a national chain, you know, a real individual one that brings character and is special, and especially at this particular location. I don't know what else we can do, put in there that realistically would work so well in greeting riders from the train.
I agree.
If there's no objection, then I'm going to look for a motion. I need one.
I'll move approval, Mr. Chairman. I don't have, my computer just died, so I can't read the text.
Let's see here.
Case number 2103.
Case number 2103. Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We appreciate it.
Then we move to other business, unfinished business, new business. Mr. Green,
No business.
No business.
Yes,
Is our next meeting going to be live?
I just wanted to point out, remember that we have a heavy workload for June, and I suspect July is probably going to be just as busy. So again,
Sounds like vacation time for some of us.
yes, as soon as this meeting ends, it starts for me. But anyway, on June 8th, we're going to have a meeting simply to discuss the CMUD regulations. And in the following Tuesday, our normally scheduled meeting on the 15th, we'll have another meeting with, again, some very interesting cases.
Okay, well,
We
you
will
know how
both be
to
live.
scare us before we leave you.
Go forward, yes.
Okay. But you anticipate those meetings will be in person, Mr.
Yes,
King?
they will be. Yes.
All right.
Our Downtown Action Committee will be live. Our Zoning Board of Appeals will be live. And we're going to start with the Planning Board as well.
All right, terrific. Well, thank you, Aaron, for coming. If there's no other business, we stand adjourned. Thank you all.